What's happening? MC Marcus Chapman here, ready to break down show number 14 of the MC 25. This show was done on WTLC in Indianapolis on June 6th, 2000, and it's called Rolling for the Summer on Dubs. And what's the backstory? Well, here it is. I'm here to tell you. All right. So here's the deal. All right. I started working in Indianapolis in September of 99. My first show was on September 30th, which was a Thursday. And through 99, I was doing my thing, getting established with the audience. By the time we got to 2000, people started really digging what I was doing on the air. And so when we got to summer, I was firmly established as the night host for the 6 to 10 show on WTLC, not just in Indianapolis, but people around the country were starting to take notice as well. And so one of the things that kind of made me stand out at the time was I would take songs that were popular and I would take the song title and flip that into a participation feature, like something that people could call and leave messages and be a part of to, get the show popping. Now, I'm not the only person to do that. I wasn't the first person to do that, but I did it a whole lot around that time, and it was very original. No, they're not coming to get me. All right, so like, for example, okay, Lil Wayne, his very first single was called The Block Is Hot. Well, I had a thing called a check-in on the show where people would call and check in, represent their part of town. But after a while, I got tired of hearing east side, west side, north side, south side, all that. And I had them call and say exactly what block they were on. So people will say the block is hot on 39th in Indiana, the block is hot on 65th in Keystone, or whatever the case may be. And so it was kind of a way to let people have some pride in their city and where they were from, pride in their street, their neighborhood, and all of that. And it got the phone lines jumping. Plus, I had a pager, a voicemail, where people could leave messages. So I was using it for all of that. And, I had other little features. Holla Holla was a similar thing. Took Ja Rule's song Holla Holla. And instead of having people give shout outs, they gave hollers. And I was the only one doing that, So by the time we got to summer, I had done that on a few occasions with different songs. But what happened was the big timers, Cash Money, the whole crew, Juvenile, Lil Wayne, all of them, Manny Fresh and Baby, they came out with a song called Get Your Roll On. In the video, they was out rolling around, showing off the cars and all that stuff. One of the things about being a great personality is figuring out what your audience is into, even if you're not into it yourself. Like, for example, I can care less about cars. I've never really been a big car person, talking about makes and models of cars, car accessories, and all that kind of stuff. It's never really meant that much to me. But I knew that a lot of people in my audience were into cars. And since summertime was coming up, I knew people were going to be out rolling around in their rides. Guys want to get out there and floss the rides, try to get the females' attention. The women going to be out rolling around trying to kick it. So I knew that it was right on time. The song had just came out, Get Your Roll On. I heard it in the clubs first, and then we started playing it on the radio. And so I wanted to make sure my show started out hot all the time. So I started doing something called Get Your Roll On. And this show that you hear, June 6, 2000, was the first time that I introduced it. And you hear the audience eat it up like right away, like they were just totally into it immediately. Now, what's funny is the show starts off, I play like a call or something from somebody, because I was actually off the night before that. The day before that was my birthday, June 5th. And MS, which owned the station at that time, they had a rule where you could not work on your birthday. I would have preferred to work on my birthday, but I didn't. I had a birthday party that Friday night, June the 2nd, at this spot called the Omega Center. And then Monday I was off, So Tuesday, June the 6th, was my first day back from my birthday party. So you hear me mention thanking people who came out a couple of times. But at that time, the 6 o'clock hour, I had been doing a feature called the After Work Check-In, which honestly I have no recollection of doing that. I didn't do it very long, couldn't have, because I remember I had to check in. Then in early 2000, I had The Block Is Hot. Then I remember I did something with the schools where kids would call and represent their school. And I know I did it twice. I did it in the spring, and then I brought it back in the fall. So At some point, I flipped that. Instead of having the kids call, I had people calling in who were still at work or leaving work or whatever. And that was just in the 6 o'clock hour. But that was kind of temporary until I came up with Get Your Roll On. So you hear that feature in the 6 o'clock hour, but that was the last time I ever did it, because I introduced Get Your Roll On in the 7 o'clock hour, or going into the 7 o'clock hour. And I had people call for, that whole hour to get their roll on it. You hear people calling, you hear people leaving messages, and it just worked like a charm. And it kind of set the whole summer off, because what I did the following night, starting the next night, Wednesday, June the 7th, I moved that to the very beginning of the show. Matter of fact, some of the calls that came in on the voicemail, some of the messages that were left this first night, June 6th, actually started off the show the next night on June the 7th, because a lot of times I would start out with a message and then go into my intro. So it kicked the summer off right, and that was the first thing everybody would call for in the 6 o'clock hour for the rest of the summer. And then eventually I went back to having the kids call to rep their school when they went back to school and summertime was over. So the whole idea of Get Your Roll On was, it was another creative idea that I had. And it's an example of the creativity that I and a lot of people had at that time in radio. What was interesting, though, is as the summer went on, my idea was just people calling to say what kind of ride they was rolling in. Well, for the younger people who weren't old enough to drive, they didn't want to get left out, so they started making up stuff. Oh, I'm rolling in the whatever, and it's like they wasn't even old enough to have a car. But they would call and leave messages, and it made it even more fun than I intended it to be. And what also happened is that there was one call on this show where somebody said it, but then a lot of people started calling and saying, I'm rolling in the 99 Lexus on dubs. They would always add on dubs to show off the fact that they had the 20-inch rims. That was a big thing at the time. So that's why the show is called Rolling for the Summer on Dubs. So Get Your Roll On was a hit right away. It went really well. Then the next thing that happened was the 5 Most Wanted Countdown. That was in the 8 o'clock hour. Honestly, I didn't really like that too much, only because it wasn't 8 songs. I would have preferred 8 songs instead of 5, especially since my competition had 8 songs and they had a prize. I didn't normally have a prize on mine for whatever reason. And then the last hour was a mix from DJ Paul Bunyan. People called to get a hollers on. And I would play the calls and play the messages. The only unfortunate thing about this particular show is you don't hear the whole 9 o'clock hours, because the tape cut off at a certain point. But you pretty much get the gist of the show. So this is an example of what was happening in the summer 2000. This was the beginning of it on that show, that 6 to 10 night show. And it's the second show that I picked that I did in Indianapolis, and there's one more coming up before the MC25 is over that represents what I was doing even better. But for now, this is an example of, a personality, being creative, being in tune with the audience, and coming up with stuff for them to participate in. And that's what was happening at that time in 2000 on a lot of the night shows around the country. And this was one of the best ones. So you hear it kicking off for the very first time. Get Your Roll On, people rolling for the summer on dubs on WTLC Indianapolis 105.7 at that time. Now it's 106.7. But you can check that out, all right? And coming up at number 13 is a show that I did in Chicago. It's another night show, but it's a little bit different, and it was chosen for the MC25 for a totally different reason. But we'll get into that next. Right now it's number 14, Rolling for the Summer on Dubs. Get Your Roll On. MC Marcus Chapman. This is for my people in Indianapolis who were doing their thing in 2000 that summer right here. Let's check it out.